Rupa, Polly, super excited to have you with us today. I'll go ahead and let you take it from here.
Awesome.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you so
Paolo.
much. All right. So we'll just quickly kick us off. Thank you so much for having us here. And Polly, do you want to start with an introduction?
Yeah, of course. So great to have everyone here. My name is Polly Allen. I started my career in tech, so I do have a master's of computer science from MIT. But after 10 years of building, I decided I wanted to be more on the product side and figuring out why we're building what we're building, with a little more user empathy. I've been working in product for over 10 years now. Most recently, I was the principal product manager at Alexa AI, where I launched the very first generative AI answers on Alexa back in 2020. So we had to learn a lot of tech risk and just all the risks, mitigate a lot of risks associated with the uncertainty of the technology at the time. I'm excited to share what I've learned with you about how AI products are different.
Awesome. Thanks, Polly. Hey, everyone. My name is Rupa Chaturvedi, and I'm the founder of Design Leaders Edge. My background is in product and UX design, and for the last 15 years plus, I have been working at the intersection of human-centered design and emerging tech. I helped launch Amazon's first AR-enabled shopping experience and moved on to Alexa, where I collaborated with Polly on several products that we launched using conversational AI. And most recently, I led a team in Uber, where we built several products, both AI and non-AI, that were focused on merchant-facing applications on the Uber Eats platform. Super excited to meet you guys today and share some of our learnings and experiences. So today's agenda includes, a quick overview of product design and how designing for AI applications is different when you are thinking from a user experience and design perspective. And then Polly's going to cover how data and engineering considerations are unique when you're building AI applications. As Paulo mentioned in the end, we'll save about 15 minutes for Q&A. So hold your questions till then. Jumping right in, I'm going to share some of my experiences on the AI product design side and how we did it at Alexa. So traditional UX basically is a bit more structured and more predictive. And what you're offering users is a very linear, set journey that helps them use UI elements to go from point A to point B. And you have a bit of a logic built in, but that's what designers and product managers do, is they're defining the interface, they're defining the path for the user and offering them the UX that helps them achieve the jobs to be done. Moving on to AI, it becomes a little messier and non-linear, if I can say so, where the user might end up choosing different paths and be able to transition from one modality to another in some cases. And so it's a lot more complex. It's not a non-linear organic journey, and it just is more driven by how the user is reacting to AI and how the AI is reacting to users. So it's a bit of a collaboration, if I may say so, between the users and AI. And so the way we want to think about defining user experiences and design applications for AI, it requires us to have a mental model shift, a mindset shift of how we think about following the steps and the processes in defining user experiences for AI. So a couple of applications that you might be familiar with, and I'm going to use these as examples. Question answering is a very common application for AI, where you're using AI assistants, chatbots, even in some cases, co-pilots to answer questions that basically is helping users get information they need or perform certain tasks or get through, in a flow that they are in. Personalized recommendations. Personalization is a significant, user expectation when it comes to AI. Users expect AI to be smart, intelligent, have context, and be able to offer, relevant, personalized recommendations. And so that's another very popular application of AI. Summarization. You're uploading documents, or you're asking information that summarizes a lot of content for the user. And so they expect to be able to articulate those queries and ask AI what the output is expected. In some cases, if you have used products like Notion, for example, Jasper.ai, you expect to fine tune that summarization, make it longer, make it shorter, change the tone, etc. Knowledge retrieval, again, there's tons of data out there, and enabling users to be able to pull the information that's relevant to them is another application. And then predictive inputs, where if you have used iPhone chat, for example, or Google Gmail, etc., you're able to predict what the user might want to type in next. LinkedIn has recently launched a feature where after every post you see pills at the bottom that are predicting the next question that the user might want to ask relevant to that particular post. And so these are, some popular and upcoming applications of AI. And each one of them is a very different mental model than what you might have been used to when designing a traditional web application or mobile app. So the building blocks of, typical AI applications, and I'm going to double click on chatbots, AI assistants for a bit, just because it will help you understand what the clear differentiation is between traditional UXs and AI UXs. So chatbots, AI assistants are extremely popular, and they are becoming more and more prevalent because of the plug and play, opportunity that companies like OpenAI, Google Bard, etc., are offering. Is here's our API and here's a chat box in a box, right? And so it makes it very easy for organizations to implement these type of applications for AI. So when you're thinking about chatbots, AI assistants that address all of these different applications that I mentioned earlier, you're basically enabling a conversational experience for the user. So users can interact with technology, with AI, and with the application you're building in a very natural conversation-like modality. So the expectation from users is that the chatbot or the AI assistant is going to mimic human-to-human interactions. So what that really means is be able to have multi-turn conversations. If I ask a question, the AI can respond, and I can ask a follow-up question. There's a follow-up response, and so on and so forth. So that's one of the user expectations to keep in mind, which is very different from what we have done in our traditional UX designs previously, right? The other one is to be able to preempt user response. Because we are offering them an open-ended way for them to interact with the application and with AI, there are not too many UI elements or affordances for them to follow a set path. We are creating a very open-ended, non-linear organic journey that they can navigate at their own pace and in whichever direction they want. And so to think through a bit in advance in terms of what could be the user response, what might they want to ask next, what might be the next step they want to take, and be able to proactively preempt those steps and offer them, what should be the ideal, follow-up to the previous step. Now, that's another, mental model shift we need to make as designers and product managers, is start thinking about our interfaces as a bit more dynamic and collaborative with the user rather than preset and predefined, right? Semantic relationships. So that's another key area to think about as you are building AI products, is how is the user going to provide these inputs to the chatbot or the AI assistant, and how each user might do this very differently from the other user. I might say something like, find me the best running shoes for women. And Polly might say, what's your recommendation for the best running shoes? And we're both trying to say the same thing, which is we want the AI to search for women's running shoes. And so being able to understand all of these different variations of inputs that different users might query, and the relationships between each of these inputs, which is called semantic relationships, and then building a robust system for the AI to understand different types of inputs, different variations, different ways the users might form their query, and still provide a relevant, robust response, is something the designer has to start thinking about these days, which is, again, slightly different from what we have done before, which is we provide a lot of UI elements like buttons, drop-downs, various interaction patterns, and the user is required to follow those preset patterns. Here, we are thinking about the different ways that users might form queries, preempting their response, and being able to understand no matter how they have formed those queries. And then in the case of AI, specifically in conversational experiences, we expect failure cases just because we have provided users with open-ended ways of forming their queries. And so there might be unsupported queries that come from user. They might define the query in a way that the AI might not understand. A lot of you are working on AI applications that are restricted in scope. You might be building something specific for finance or specific for customer support. And even though you're offering a chatbot type of an interface, it doesn't mean that the user should just type in what's the best running shoe when you're offering a chatbot for finance applications, right? So how do you then make sure that the user doesn't have a negative experience or a failed experience? And so in these cases, you have to start thinking about building blocks that include soft landings, elegant ways of addressing these type of unsupported queries, and giving prompts and giving tools for the user to come back to the original scope, so they don't feel like they're hitting a dead end and they don't abandon and drop off. So those are a couple of design paradigms to think about. And last but not least, thinking about personality, where if you're defining a chatbot, and if you see the news right now, there's so many different AI assistants and chatbots being launched literally every day, and some are promising a lot more than what we are used to in terms of the level of intelligence, the level of conversational capabilities, and also personality. Just a couple of days ago, I saw a post on LinkedIn, which was a legal AI assistant helping lawyers with legal tasks, and they had a pretty funky personality defined for the chatbot, and it was animated, and it was positioned as an actual person who is now helping the lawyers in the back end. So should you define a personality for your AI application? Should you define a completely new brand and tone and put a name behind it? Should you have an icon that represents? Is that the right thing to do for your use case? These are new considerations that designers have to think about as they are defining AI applications. I understand from Teams and Microsoft Copilot that they didn't want the users to feel like they're interacting with Microsoft. So they created a separate entity called Copilot. And that's what Amazon did as well. Alexa is a completely different entity with a different brand and personality. And so the user felt like they're talking to a person called Alexa, which has been personified. In the case of Copilot, it feels less personified, doesn't have a name, doesn't have a tone. But if you look at the interface, you can change the way the personality shifts for Copilot. So different companies take different approaches to this. And you as a designer and product manager might want to think about, does personality play a role in your AI applications? Again, something that is not very traditional to the way we design products today. Again, sharing some experiences of what we did at Alexa. So the way we would kick off any project at Alexa would be to define the user value and customer problem, making sure that we understand AI is able to deliver significant value to the user and is solving the problem. We would define a golden utterance. Like, what's the easiest way for the user to query Alexa for that specific use case? So one of them was, for example, give me ideas for X. That was a golden utterance. And X could be Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, holidays, Christmas, birthday parties, etc. So we would define that golden utterance, and then we would come up with a plan of how to educate and train the user, and always using that golden utterance so that it makes it easy for them to remember, and for the AI to always know that this is what the user intent is. This is what they're trying to query the AI for. And then we would brainstorm a whole bunch of different input variations. What are the different ways the user could say, give me ideas for Valentine's Day or a birthday party, right? And we would try and define the semantic relationships between all of these different variations. We would say it in different accents. We would write down in different, word combinations, and make sure that the AI understood all of those input variations. So the user had a positive experience the first time they interacted with AI. And then we would define the dialogue, logic, and flow. What if the user said this? Then the AI should respond to this. What if the user said this? The AI should respond in this way. What if the user comes up with a unsupported query? What should the AI do? So we would flow chart all of these different dialogue options and flows that the user might take participate in, and offer that to our engineering and science team to build that logic into the flow. And then we would manually write the Alexa responses to define what the bar is and how we define a quality response for our partner teams. Eventually, the teams would scale and automate these responses, but we would always start with what we believe is the ideal, user experience for the users. We would define soft landings, which is a way to address dead ends, error cases, unsupported queries. And we would manually write these down and say, if the user asks these type of questions that are not supported, provide these responses, which are again, predefined. And finally, we would define the personality. So if it is something as, professional as users wanting to purchase high-end consumer gear like cameras and electronics, we don't want Alexa to be fun and frolicky and funny and casual. We want some level of professionalism. Versus we actually ended up defining an experience that was, Alexa, find me all the funny items on Amazon catalog. And that's where we were bringing a bit more humor and wittiness into it. So you might want to tune that personality too, depending on what the use case is and what you want the user experience to be. So this was a typical flow chart for us in terms of how we came up with a brand new project at Alexa and the steps we would follow. Is very different from how you would be doing this in a traditional mobile app or a web application. So when we talk about AI applications, as I mentioned, each user might end up having an organic, non-linear, and very unique user journey compared to the other users. So each user might have different user journeys. And so for us as product managers and designers, we want to think about how to build great human-computer interactions. And as we talked about the user expectations and what makes a great experience, you want to understand the foundations of human-to-human interaction, because that's at the core of user expectations is how do you replicate that human-to-human interaction with your AI applications? And with that, I'll leave a quick food for thought or a question for thought for all of you is, as we see these paradigms shifting and new ways of building user experiences for our users, how do we believe our role as product and design leaders would evolve? And the way I'm thinking about this is our role is basically training humans to interact with AI more effectively and training AI to interact with humans more effectively. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Polly.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rupa. And it's interesting that we're talking about the UX. I've seen some great questions pouring in. I'm going to start off with the data and engineering considerations, talking a little bit about the UX. If you can move to the next slide. And the fact that UX is now considered, oh, we're moving on?
Yeah, sorry, I lost my slide. Okay, there you are.
There we are. Perfect. That because so moving beyond just chatbots, right? That was sort of the first iteration of generative AI applications. What we're seeing now is more imaginative patterns coming out with UX, where we're having integrated drop-down lists, or even the whole UX itself being dynamic, based on not just what segment a user falls into, but having a user segment of one, that degree of personalization. You saw the announcements recently from Apple that they're going to be releasing Apple Intelligence on their devices, so an on-device generative AI capabilities in this fall coming up. And I think it's going to drive a huge boom in this hyper personalization. And it has huge ramifications on the design, on basically how applications look and feel. You can imagine if this set of the contextual menu items they currently have in Miro here as an example, you can imagine reordering these based on how frequently the user uses them, or based on like the likelihood based on their prior behavior, what other users have clicked on, based on the constellation of features that they use most often, right? And similarly, the example on the left is showing you could actually rearrange your entire UX. So instead of having that "how may I help" blank chat kind of problem of having users try to think of what they want to do, you're showing things in an order that is personalized to users and rearranging that. So not only does this present a whole new design paradigm and evolution that we're living through, super, super exciting, but it also means that data is so much more important than it has ever been before, right? If people who have dived into AI a little bit understand that data is really like the gasoline on which AI applications run. So you move to the next slide, please, Rupa. The current pattern that is certainly the most prevalent in applications today is retrieval augmented generation, right? So instead of actually trying to use LLMs for their quote unquote knowledge, where they may have hallucinations, logic errors, etc., we're engineering systems where a user asks a question and they do some form that behind the scenes we do some kind of lookup for a domain specific knowledge base and then use LLM as like the text generator, even the UX generator, right, where it's generating things that are source informed from the knowledge base, right? What this means, though, is that our capabilities in juggling knowledge have become the point of failure, right? And what I see a lot of people, they say, "Oh, retrieval augmented generation, this is a solved problem." There are a lot of more complex issues that people often overlook when they're building these kinds of systems. On the next slide, please. So making or breaking user trust like really depends on data, and that's going to drive adoption every time, right? So making sure you're getting absolutely the most relevant data is now a problem that if you haven't had a background traditionally in search, all of a sudden now you need to understand more about how do I find the most relevant answer from a set of information. The information needs to be accurate. It also needs to be up to date, right? Often I don't see people considering how am I going to keep that knowledge base as up to date and fresh as it needs to be. If that knowledge base is data about the user so that we can do personalization, how are we making sure that we have the appropriate user signals that are keeping that up to date and aren't 6 months old, 12 months old, and looking like, hey, this is personal and you don't know me. That really breaks trust right away. One people often miss too is this idea of the trustworthiness of the source. We definitely saw this play at Alexa, where if we were answering questions from web sources, if we had something that sounded like it was not very trustworthy, like GeoCities or something, recommending something, people would often go, "Wow, really? Alexa doesn't even know to use more trusted sources for something as important as medical advice." So we had to actually limit the sources that could be used for things like medical, legal advice, business advice, etc., just to maintain that user trust and make sure that never gets broken. Next slide, please. So this means that the engineering patterns are shifting, right? I would say some of the earliest applications we saw of generative AI were doing the actual generation, right? The inference from the model. We're doing it offline. And so a great example of this is if you've seen on Amazon, they have their AI summarized customer reviews where they can look over a set of reviews, summarize it. This can be generated a priori. This can be generated before you come to the page, right? You generate it one time. Maybe you run this once a day to pick up new uh, comments that have come in, right? New reviews, but it doesn't have to be up to the minute. You'll notice these only exist on something that has a certain high number of reviews on it, so that one review won't change the whole slant of how the majority of these reviews are coming in. And so this is interesting because it doesn't have these really short-term latency capabilities, right? And that need to keep it super, super up to date to the second. The hardest engineering patterns to implement are things that are real-time systems, so things like chatbots, where you're requiring low latency to continue to chat with the user, and that also need updated information, right? One of the hardest has been like proactively telling users when something happens, right? So not only do they need to be up to date with news from the world and to be able to proactively notify, because you would lose trust if you were telling someone a day late about a news item, but also having that low system latency in the the generation, text generation itself. So we can see that as organizations have gained capabilities, often they'll start off with some of these easier patterns to implement that don't have such high tech barriers to implementing them. The real-time systems ones, you have to be very savvy about data pipelines, not only just the integration of AI. So even if you do everything right, next slide, please, Rupa, things can still go horribly wrong. And this is true even with the existing RAG implementation systems. You may remember this incident is a real incident from November 2021. No children were harmed. So this is still a fun story that we can laugh about now. But what had happened at the time, Alexa was answering from a web page. And at the time, we were using very extractive technology where we were looking at web pages and really lifting quotes to provide answers. And in this case, then there was a challenge going around on TikTok called a live plug with a penny challenge, was challenging people to pull the plug out halfway and touch one of the prongs with a penny. So there was a lot of news coverage of this channel decrying it as dangerous and can you believe what the kids are doing these days, similar to the Tide Pods eating challenge that had gone around. So the description of the challenge was in the news everywhere online, right? Here's what the challenge consists of. You have to touch a penny to a prong of a plug. In this case, a user had asked, what's a fun challenge to try? And in response, Alexa said, here's something I found online. Touch a live penny to a prong. It looked like Alexa was suggesting to the child that they should do it. So this is an example of something that, one, we had identified beforehand through really thorough risk analysis that out of context answers being incorrect was definitely something that we were anticipating could happen. And we had guardrails in place to make sure these kinds of answers were taken down immediately. As soon as this was reported, we had reporting lines that could take answers down within 15 minutes, making sure no one else was harmed by this. And that we'd also, although we weren't anticipating this drastic of something coming out of context, anticipating it was really key, along with monitoring, right? So we actually had teams that were monitoring all the Alexa does weird things, Reddit threads, and taking care to know that all of the customer support teams knew exactly who to contact to quickly get an answer taken down. Our policy was to take something down and then look later if it was really a problem, if there was any kind of blurry lines, because we knew this kind of thing was possible. Really trying to anticipate what could go wrong in your system is one of the hardest things with AI systems. So I encourage you to really think about, conducting some risk mitigation, risk identification and mitigation exercises, and decide what kind of mitigations you're going to include. And we have some great guidance in that in our course that we're coming up doing again in August. Awesome. Thanks. And then finally, one of the key pieces with an AI system is that they are learning, right? It's one of the key reasons that I think the current hype that's coming out that is a little bit bearish on AI, that AI hasn't really proven its value for all the investment, is that these systems, when they come out, they are the worst they're ever going to be, right? As calling back to what Rupa was saying about the systems collaborating with users, really they're at their best when they have data from recent real world interactions and are continuously learning, right? So the fact that some of these systems haven't yet reached a point of maturity where they're delivering as much value as people could see and the vision for the systems, this is completely predictable, right? It makes sense to me that these are going to take some time. One key piece a lot of folks don't look at when they're planning out these systems is how much effort it is to actually incorporate new data and retrain your systems and your models. Are you going to be doing this real time? Real-time learning loops are very complicated to implement. Are you going to do this periodically? You'll notice OpenAI does new releases of models every 3-4 months, right? It is one of the most expensive parts of working with an AI model. So balancing that cost to benefit is an important thing to think of ahead of time, because you'll need some infrastructure for that retraining. And how much data is really needed to actually impact the model? I've seen several projects now where people think, okay, this is great. We're going to, as soon as we have 2,000 responses, that's enough to impact the model. They don't estimate that users only see this once a day, perhaps. And it's going to take them 2,000 days to get enough data to retrain the model. Another reason that the time to value can be longer with AI, and it does take a little bit of a leap of faith that you're going to be able to see the value from this, because you'll need this continued improvement to really see AI deliver the value. Awesome. So I just want to review some of the key takeaways. Rupa was diving into design and really how we need to reconsider our mental models, right? Chatbots are kind of the first line of attack that's been presented, but there's so much more that we can look at doing with conversational interfaces or generative AI interfaces that aren't necessarily conversational. But understanding human-to-human interaction is really the key to understanding how folks want to interact and what they'll find most natural in this new paradigm. It's key to note too that this really changes your role as product and design leaders in this space in terms of thinking about these products completely differently. And then as far as data engineering, how you use your data is really what impacts user trust and adoption. The engineering patterns are shifting as organizations learn more and as cost decreases. Really responsible AI is absolutely just table stakes now at this point. You can see that all of the organizations that are providing foundational models are putting guardrails in place. This is just so key to be able to keep an AI model up once it is in production and working. And learning is more complex than it sounds. Spend the extra due diligence time ahead of time to understand how much feedback you need and the time to ROI. We will open this up for questions. We've saved 15 minutes specifically because we wanted to get to all your questions. I see some great ones pouring in. But we did want to make sure you knew if you're interested in dipping your toe in and you have an idea, you want to see how to get to MVP, get hands-on with generative AI. Rupa and I are teaching a course starting August 9th with limited spots. So it's 3 weeks. We have 3 sessions. So define, design, and deploy. We're really talking about building into the business case and defining metrics for AI products. What does AI design look like for generative AI? And then the deployment considerations, particularly for an MVP. We dive into a lot of the tools you might need to actually get an MVP out into the world. And it's easier than ever before, no programming required, to be able to actually test your ideas with real markets. I think it's a key new skill for product and design leaders that to invest in. So please consider joining us. We're really looking forward to seeing you there. I'd also like to let you know I have a free masterclass coming up next week, Mastering AI Product Leadership. And we're going to delve a little deeper about what is this role of AI product management, how is it shaping up now in kind of the fall of 2024, and the skills you need to lead successful AI projects, the fastest path to landing a role or successfully leading those projects. We'll be doing that as a free masterclass next Tuesday, a week from today. And then Rupa, did you want to take a minute to talk about Design Leaders Edge?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Polly. So very quickly, just wanted to share, if you want to go deeper into building AI applications and you're looking for more one-on-one coaching or advanced design opportunities, check out designleadersedge.com. I offer 2 different options for professionals. And so you can reach out to me on designleadersedge.com. Awesome.
Fantastic. And I hope Paolo has dropped all of those links so you guys have them in the chat if you guys need those. That's great. Excellent. Well, thanks so much. And we're going to get on to the questions. So, Paolo, did you have a list there of some of the most upvoted questions? We're excited to get to
I
this.
I do. So I'm taking a look at the most upvoted questions. I'm going to do a quick refresh. So the most upvoted question currently is from Mark McDonald. Given the prevalence of nonlinear experiences, traditional funnel analytics start to break down.
Mhm.
How do you recommend approaching defining success metrics for AI interactions?
Really great question. Yeah, I think we had done a lot of looking at things like goal completion, right? So defining it really as that like overall are they able to accomplish their goal? And then for interactive like conversational experiences, we were constantly looking for proxy metrics like conversation continuation, right? Let's just assume that if they drop the conversation halfway through, they weren't getting what they wanted, right? So these are it depends on your use case, of course, entirely. If you're looking for something where you're looking for more engagement, then you definitely want to look at the number of turns as a metric. If you're looking for something where you're looking for efficiency, you're trying to decrease the number of turns, but you'd want to make sure they actually keep their goal accomplished. We would find those friction points and sticky spots by looking at kind of that interaction dynamics metrics as opposed to saying, did they get to step 1 or step 3 in that more linear experience? Anything to add there, Rupa?
Yeah, no, I think you covered very well.
Great. Moving on to another question from one of our attendees. They'd like to know, how can Gen AI assist in SaaS B2B product onboarding that is not a chatbot?
Oh, I like that. That's a really great question. Of course, chatbots have been, sort of the like, hey, here's Clippy. It looks like you're trying to onboard. Um, I think my mental model of this is something akin to a demo, right? So something that is illustrating how you can do this. I also think I've been really impressed with a couple of workflows and tools like Typeform or Zapier, where they're just asking you to describe what you want, and then either the form that you're trying to create is created for you, or the Zap you're trying to create, the workflow you're trying to create is created for you, where you can then go through and edit and correct it. And I think that's an interesting way to think about people onboarding and learning. And is that appropriate, or is it something where they need to understand the nitty-gritty before they dive into editing an existing workflow? I think that the that kind of done for you example can help ramp people up really quickly, as opposed to necessarily providing this like chat-like assistant walking you through it by telling you how to do it.
I think
All
even
right.
the predictive UI piece that we talked about, right? Where if you look at LinkedIn, where against every post, there is a little pill that shows, yeah, these are the questions you can answer, proactively helping users navigate through the different features in a B2B SaaS environment, how to use reports, what kind of queries you can offer. So maybe being a bit more proactive and deeply integrated into the current UX might be a better solution than a chatbot, which they might still struggle to figure out how to use.
All right. We actually have a related question to chatbots from another attendee. So chatbots are great, but you need to know what to ask. And let's say we work in tech, so we're hugely biased, but the likelihood is our users won't know how. How do you think about guided UX versus open chatbot type experiences?
That's a great question as well. I'll take a stab, Polly, and you can
Yeah.
chime in as well. But I think there are, again, going back to building blocks, we covered a few today, but happy to go deeper where you could have starter prompts. You could have, as I said, proactive, predictive, inputs for the user as well. And so one is to be upfront and proactive and say, here are a few things you can do. And every time they have an interaction with the chatbot, offering them the next best thing they can do. So I personally feel a more structured way of guiding the user is a good idea, especially initially when they are still early adopters, before you provide an open-ended, highly flexible experience. The chances of the user having a negative, not so great experience and then not wanting to come back again are much higher in that scenario. So recently I was designing Uber Eats AI assistant, and we decided to constrain the UI quite a bit by providing more prompts that the user can follow and make it extremely contextual. So they feel that it's very natural and logical, but you're still limiting them to certain different inputs.
Yeah, I would add, I think, as evidence that just a chatbot with a couple of suggestions on the things you can do is not enough, is how much ChatGPT, as much as it has this, great high people who've tried it, that the vast majority of people who've tried ChatGPT tried it and like never came back, right? So it's one of those, it's clear people don't know how to for them to derive the most value out of the box. And one thing we definitely learned at Alexa was when you're putting hints on the screen, you think you're showing them a pattern or giving them ideas or inspiring them. It really is monkey see, monkey do. So they'll do the thing you suggest, and then they're stuck again. And I definitely saw in ChatGPT, OpenAI's dealt with this by providing ongoing suggestions, like, hey, here's another question you could follow that up with to try to keep the conversation going, right? Just in hoping that as people explore, they'll find the most value. I think if you had a lot more information about the person, when they come to that experience, you're in a much better place. And then if you're, especially they came to your app, which they should be doing X, you have their goal in mind too. So you have that ability to constrain it a lot more and provide a lot more guidance in that process.
Great. We've got another question here. Can you give an example of a golden utterance you used in a project you have worked on?
Well, the most popular utterance I remember on Alexa was stop. Sorry, Alexa. Um, of course, it's used in so many different cases, right? We needed a hard stop. The key with the golden utterances, help me out here too, Rupa, but it had to be
Maybe
not only clear.
what is
Sorry,
X was one of the most popular ones.
what
What
was it?
is X, and like what
What
X
is
could be
X?
anything. That was a very popular one.
Yeah, exactly. You had to look at your use cases and then you had to make sure they were distinct enough to be easily distinguished from one another. So if you had a popular one like play X, is a golden utterance that, but it's like, do they mean play the video that's currently on the show screen? Do they mean play the radio station or the podcast or Spotify,
Yeah.
right? Um, so a lot of golden utterances really needed the opportunity to, for some disambiguation along the way. We had like what's the news about topic, was one we definitely worked on as for the news summarization feature. Again, if there were news videos that were current, that might be a better experience than a web summary. So again, we were kind of using multiple. It was often the case that multiple features were competing for an utterance, and there were fallbacks to different experiences depending on what was available.
We worked on a few that included shopping related utterances. So
Mm.
there was always a confusion about shop versus buy. I know it
Mm.
sounds very silly, but it was very confusing for users. What does shop do and what does buy do? So we ended up changing it to buy now, which means that I'm ready to purchase this now. And shop is more like I want to discover, search, etc. But some of the features we worked on were give me, so it's basically very clear, give me nutrition tips, give me cleaning tips. So during the pandemic, folks were very interested in these type of informational experiences. In terms of shopping, we would come up with give me an idea for X, and X could be anything. I am looking for X. So we would define these utterances in a way that felt very natural for the user. I'm not ready to buy, I'm just looking for something, I'm just searching for something, give me an idea for. We made it less, it made it feel like they're less committed to shopping and they're just still exploring and browsing, for example. Hopefully that answers your question.
All right, I know that we're up on time. Do we have time for one more, Polly and Rupa?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, last one. How do you navigate the conversations with legal teams? Given the different speed and timeline that they operate, it can be challenging to involve them early to make sure you're collecting necessary data from users.
So my biggest tip around both legal and responsible AI considerations is to involve them early. But if you can make as lightweight a process as possible that is ongoing, right? So it's not just we're checking in early and then we're never coming back to you. I think that's one fear a lot of legal teams have. It's all about, I think, that when we're talking about risk, right? That idea of like conduct a risk identification exercise, make sure you have a representative of all the stakeholders in the room. So that's legal and that's marketing and it's the people who are going to have to deal with negative PR. It's people on the development team, annotators who are going to have to potentially view some really disturbing, obscene things, right? But an early like 2 hour session with that group of like risk identification, but also showing them that how you're going to track and prioritize risks and that we won't necessarily be mitigating every single risk anyone can think of, in the middle of the night, they had a nightmare and we're going to do XYZ, right? We're going to tell children to touch a plug to a penny. But that you have a system for tracking them and for escalating them if they become more prevalent. Whatever you think of at the very beginning, you're not going to be able to think of all the risks that are going to become apparent through the lifetime of the project, right? So I think it's important to set up that system of check-ins, whether it's we had like once a month meetings ahead of our monthly business reviews with leadership to go through, here's our top risks. Does anyone have any new ones? Here's how we're planning to mitigate the very top ones. Here's the ones we consider below the line and we're just accepting. And then we could be on the same page with legal and other stakeholders when we went to business leadership to talk about the risks we were taking on versus the ones we had mitigations for.
Yeah, just to add to that very quickly, I think also disclaimers become a painful thing. As designers, you want your interfaces to be clean and minimalist, and legal wants to add a whole bunch of things. Make sure that you say this and make sure the AI claims this. And so that becomes a bit of back and forth with legal as well. I think I am seeing across the board, irrespective of which company, legal teams are also coming up with boilerplate, more standardized ways of communicating to users that, the AI could be incorrect or not completely reliable. And the fact that it's still in beta, it's still, and there's a very popular terminology called powered by AI, which seems to communicate it all like, hey, we're still learning, it's still AI, you're not interacting with the organization, and there's no commitment from the organization about this interaction, right? So there are ways that legal is also trying to come up with more standardized ways of setting user expectations and making sure the liability is covered.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for everybody. Thank you, Polly and Rupa, for the presentation, and thank you, everybody, for attending. If you have any other events that you want to check out, I've just sent the link out in chat, and we'll be sending a recording of this and the deck via email. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone. Great to have you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.